Hi everyone, it's William, and I did an episode of the Grand Duke Dmitri Diary series yesterday, but I have a little extra time today. It's 17th of November, and so I decided to go ahead and do another one, although it's awfully cold. I'm sort of slowly getting my little YouTube studio in order in my house. I've been painting, but yeah, I'm doing it slowly. Never enough time for these things. So, what is it? 7 degrees Celsius out here. Oh well, that's all superfluous information. We are up to the 10th of February, 1921. That's on the old calendar. And I didn't jot down, what is it on the new calendar, which is the actual date in Copenhagen on that day. It was 28th. And nearing the end of the month, a Thursday. Dmitri's still in residence at the English mission, and I hope you're not getting tired of Copenhagen and longing for Paris, because he's still got a ways to go. This is a long trip. Looking ahead today, I saw that so this is the 10th, and I saw that on the 28th he was still riding in Copenhagen at the English mission. So quite a long trip. Maybe a month. I need to look at that. So what was he up to yesterday? Well, it was Wednesday, and he went outside of the city limits with Prince Gustav from the Danish royal family, and went to have a look at Fredensborg Palace, where the Romanovs, Alexander III, and other members of the family had used to go for a big family reunion every year, and Dmitri had never gone, but he wanted to see the place, so they went out and did that. Okay, and today I thought, well, I might as well do one. These are the short diary entries, so how much time can it take? Well, it turned out to be a very complicated one. Even with my notes, I still had to do a lot of looking up of people and of names. Quite a social day for Dmitri. So let's go ahead and dive into that. And then on the other side, after I've read the diary entry, we'll talk about each of the people who are mentioned. All very interesting people. Well, for the most part, at least. Okay, here we go. I went shopping with Lucia in the morning, and we had lunch at home. In the afternoon, I went for a drive with her and with Charles Murray. The weather was relatively nice, and the sun was shining, but it was remarkably cold. We had tea at home, and then I did some writing. I dined at the invitation of Marie-Louise Moltke. I stopped by to pick her up, and we went to her brother's tiny apartment for dinner. Baroness Plessin was there. She's Madame Hasselbach's sister, and Countess Abelfield was there as well. It was a very nice dinner, really sympathique. I like Marie-Louise's brother, but the fellow who's a bore is her cousin, also a Moltke. Afterwards, we went to a big ball hosted by Scavenius. He's the foreign minister and the former ambassador to Petrograd. His wife is beautiful and sweet, but narrow-minded. It was a very nice evening. I met Audrey Parr there. She lives here. Her husband is the first secretary at the English mission, a nice man. I talked a lot with Madame Scavenius and, of course, also with Marie-Louise. I got home around 3 o'clock, so this was not quite as long as the ball had been at the English mission, the British mission, I should say. Dmitri calls it the English mission. That one went on till 5 o'clock, partly because of Prince Gustav, who just didn't want to go home. He was enjoying it so much. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Shopping with Lucia. That was almost a daily activity in London. when Dmitri first arrived there with the Marlings in 1919. And Lucia went shopping almost every day, and she kind of dragged him along with her, and she kind of treated him as almost a possession. And he, you know, for quite a while, he went along with it. He ended up getting fed up with it. He didn't go off shopping by himself a lot. He usually went with his sister or Lucia or maybe a friend, a male friend who was visiting from somewhere else. And yeah, so anyway, in Copenhagen, Lucia and Dmitri are kind of resuming that aspect of their previous relationship. He goes for the afternoon drives with her and goes shopping with her, whether he likes it or not. I wish I knew if he liked it or not. He was doing it anyway, so okay, and then they go for their drive, but this time they're joined by Sir Charles, and Dmitri had this interesting habit of calling him Charles Murray. And Ed was the first one who pointed out the link to me. I'm rather ashamed to say that I didn't get it myself because I'm the Russian speaker, and you know, the one doing the translations. But I think he's absolutely right that Dmitri didn't call him Sir Charles. He called him Charles Murray, and this was almost certainly because of the Russian tradition. So in the Russian tradition, if you want to use the most polite form of address, you don't say Mr. So-and-so. You say, you use the or Mrs. or Madam so-and-so. You use the person's first name and their patronymic. So the tradition in Russia is that you have your own Christian name, and then whether you're male or female, you have your father's name as your middle name. So in Dmitri's case, Dmitri Pavlovich, because his father was Paul, and his sister Maria was Maria Pavlovna. So that was how you address someone politely. And so Dmitri has adapted this, and the name of the gentleman is Charles Murray Marling. And I would rather doubt that there was anyone else who called him Charles Murray instead of Sir Charles or, but Dmitri does. He calls him Charles Murray, rather charming. All right, you know, Sir Charles was really, really a father figure to Dmitri in a very real sense. And outside of the pages of his diaries, where he does refer to him as Marling sometimes, old Marling sometimes, but usually he uses this very respectful and courteous form of address, even though he's on a first name basis with Lucia. He calls her Lucia, as you can see. I went shopping with Lucia. But when it comes to Sir Charles, there's this extra layer of respect. So he's Charles Murray. All right, so Marie Louise. Now here I am in error and Dmitri is correct. I was kind of laughing at the fact that he never knows when to inject a fan or a de, but in the case of Marie Louise, she is Moltke, not fan Moltke, because I was mistaking the Moltke, the German Moltkes, who were fan Moltkes, with the Danish Moltkes, who were just Moltkes, although she was a countess, her father Adam was a count, but there was no fan. So I guess it's not part of the Danish tradition. So he was right about that, and I was wrong. So she is, she has arranged probably, or is the hostess at a dinner for him in his honor, but it's not. Maybe she lived with her parents. She was what? She was 23. And she was single, so she probably lived with her parents. But her brother had an apartment. Her slightly younger brother had an apartment. Tiny apartment, but big enough to accommodate several guests. So We are not yet at the point where Dmitri is socializing with members of the small Russian colony in Copenhagen. These are not Russian people, but they're all people Dmitri knew, or mostly people Dmitri knew. It sounds like maybe he didn't know the Baroness Plessin, but he knew her sister, and he knew both her sisters. So she was a very young woman, brave of Marie-Louise to invite her. She was only 20 years old at that time. Maybe the two of them were, girlfriends and confidants. Her name was Baroness Karen de Plessin or von Plessin. And yeah, her sister was, that Dmitri knew, the sister wasn't present at this dinner, but he's, Dmitri's point of reference upon meeting Karen Plessin is her sister that he knows. So the sister was Louisa Plessin, who her married name was Hasselbalch, and she was quite a bit older than her younger sister. She was 28, and her husband, who wasn't present, well, neither of them were present, Erich Hasselbalch, was the co-owner of a very prosperous and successful business enterprise. He and his older brother Hasselbalch and Co. And as far as I can gather, they mainly manufactured curtains and drapes, but they did very well in that. And okay, so that's probably why Baroness Plessin was not, the Plessins weren't Danish, but she probably was there visiting her older sister. And then there's another sister who's there as well. Her married name is Countess, well, the American in me wants to say Abelfeld, but it was probably more like Ablefeld or Ablefeld. Go figure. I believe they were German? No, maybe not, because her maiden name was Plessin, Fritzi Plessin, and Fritzi von Plessin. But her husband, the Count Abelfeld, was actually in Denmark as at the Belgian embassy in Denmark. He was the Belgian ambassador or minister to Denmark. So maybe, so two of the sisters were in Denmark, one with her Belgian husband who was a diplomat, the other with her husband who was actually Danish, and probably the youngest of them, Karin, was probably there visiting, and she was invited by Marie-Louise, who apparently didn't perceive her as a possible rival. That's good. Maybe she was kind of on the homely side. I don't know. So he enjoys the dinner, and he likes Marie-Louise's brother. Well, Marie-Louise actually had three brothers. So this would have been Jerome, I guess. I don't know. Their mother was French. She was a Bonaparte. So this brother was a little bit younger than Marie-Louise. No, it wasn't Jerome. I'm sorry, it was Léon. Jerome was 19. Léon was 22. And the youngest one, Adam Nicholas, was 12. So it would have been Léon. Yeah, and their father was a Danish diplomat. And I don't know anything about Léon, and I don't know anything about the cousin. I don't even know the cousin's first name. Dmitri found him to be a bore. He uses this word Ham, which comes, a Russian word that comes from the biblical figure, Old Testament figure, Ham, who was, who incurred the wrath of his father by bursting into his father's tent when his father was drunk and naked. Okay, and boy, did that, the father was Noah, and that really, really, it made Noah so angry and outraged that he actually cursed his son and sent him away. And so that's where the word comes from in Russian, chamstvo, and it's hard to it's hard to translate it directly, but you get the idea. Kind of a boorish person, a disrespectful person like Ham in the Bible. Okay, and then after the dinner, they go off to a big ball hosted by the Danish foreign minister, and this is Scavenius. Dmitri knew him because he had been the Danish ambassador to Petrograd, and he stayed in Petrograd, I think, till 1918, possibly 1919, and then came back and was given this position as the foreign minister in Denmark. And here we meet his wife. Wow, when I found a picture of her online, I was blown away. She's gorgeous, in my opinion. I've tried always, when Dmitri had a female acquaintance that he mentions in the diary, I always try and find pictures. Well, I always try and find pictures of the men as well. But a lot of the women, you know, okay, yeah, she's pretty. But, boy, Madame Scavenius, I have to say, she is a real beauty. And I think Dmitri is a little infatuated. Watch out, Marie-Louise, although in this instance she's a married woman, so she's not a prospect to be a future. She's not a marital prospect for him, but she's beautiful, she's sweet, and it sounds like he spends as much time talking to her during the ball as he does talking to Marie-Louise. And you remember in past diary entries, when there have been balls, he's always spent the whole time speaking to Marie-Louise. Well, this time around, he's dividing that time, and he's spending some of it talking to Madame Scavenius. So, in addition to her picture, I was able to find out about her that she was much younger than her husband. She was 27, and her husband Harold was 48. So Dmitri always had an eye for a pretty woman with a sweet disposition, so he was drawn right to her. And in addition to being beautiful and sweet, he tells us that she's narrow-minded. So what does that mean? So the Russian word nedalyokaya. She doesn't have vision that extends out. She's not far-sighted in her vision. So I wish he had told us what they talked about. I hope he does tell us what they talked about when he does his long diary entry that summarizes all of this, because why did he find her narrow-minded or short-sighted? They can't have argued, or it can't have been related to Russia, because otherwise he wouldn't have described her as sweet. Anyway, the next woman. Now, Madame Scavenius is pretty much off limits. He's not going to be seeing a lot of her. But the next woman, Audrey Parr, he will be. He will be meeting with her. He'll be getting together with her one-on-one in the days to come. And she is someone that he knew in London. So she appears in his diary entries for 3 years, 1919, 1920, and 1921. And she also figures in his address books. He has her address in London, and he has her address in Paris. And right now he informs us she is living in Copenhagen, because her husband is serving under Sir Charles as the first secretary to at the British mission. His name was Raymond. And yeah, Dmitri says he's a nice man. I don't think Dmitri really, yeah, again, it's a married woman, and I don't know that he even had any intention of having an affair with her. Unfortunately, I don't remember what was going on in the 1919 and 1920 diaries, but I don't recall there being, you know, they were obviously drawn to each other and they found each other interesting, but I don't know that it went beyond that. And indeed, she was a very interesting woman. And in fact, her real love object was a Frenchman named Paul Claudel. And she and her husband, oddly enough, her husband had been assigned as a diplomat to Brazil during the First World War, and they were down in Rio, and Paul Claudel, who was also a diplomat, but a French diplomat, was in Rio as well. And they got to know each other. And she divorced at Raymond at one point, but she didn't then go and marry Paul Claudel. It seems to have been a platonic relationship based upon, I mean, it was a love relationship, apparently. His letters and poetry indicates that they loved each other, but probably platonically. And so she kind of became his muse. And he, meanwhile, had a secretary named Darius, I don't know what the French pronunciation would be, Milhaud, Milhaud. And he was private secretary to Claudel in Rio. And Milhaud turned out to be an artist, a serious artist. And he composed ballets. And the first of his ballets was called L'Homme et son Désir, Man and His Desire, or The Man and His Desire. Would you use the? Is it a particular man? I'm not sure. But oddly enough, this ballet premiered in Paris in 1921. So maybe Dmitri will mention it at some point. And lo and behold, the sets and the decor for the ballet were designed by Audrey Parr, who obviously had met Milhaud also in Rio. So she was quite an interesting woman. I didn't find a picture of her. I don't know what she looked like, and Dmitri doesn't talk to her talk about her the way he talks to someone that he's instantly attracted to, like Madame Scavenius. But even though it's making this a lengthy video, I wanted to talk about her because you can see that he was often attracted to interesting people. He had more depth than people give him credit for. And she was a very interesting person, and let's keep that in mind going forward as he's meeting with her one-on-one. In Copenhagen, and also if we go back and do the 1919, 1921 or 1920 diaries. And in fact, this is new information to me that I just found out today, so it will be interesting to reread those earlier diary entries and to remind myself of what kind of relationship they had and why it was that Dmitri was drawn to her. Anyway, thank you for your patience today. And the next diary entry, which I'll be doing either tomorrow or Tuesday, will be, about members of the Russian colony, and Dmitri's social activities continue to expand. And I hope to see you then. Bye.